Fabulous.
Bring a bottle.
Well, you won't be able to bring Rishi Sunak, though, because he's in trouble today. I don't think he'd be welcome in many people's homes because he has unveiled plans. What he is saying is on a moral mission, basically. It's all about this so-called sick note culture of Britain. In his sights, he's got those people that are on long-term sickness. He thinks that it's too much, especially when it comes to young people, especially when it comes to things like mental health and all the rest of it. But he's also got these so-called, they're not called sick notes, they're called fit notes. And whether or not GPs should be prescribing them or handing them out, basically, he's suggesting that perhaps there's a conflict of interest. Maybe the doctor might like the person a bit much and feel bad and sign them off, etc.
I think it's a very tricky thing because obviously there are people who are long-term ill who aren't able to work, and often when you have these sorts of crackdowns on people exploiting the benefits system, you worry about people sort of getting caught up in the crossfires. But there's no question that certainly since the pandemic and the subsequent lockdowns that accompanied them, there has been a massive uptick in the number of people leaving the workforce, both the elderly just deciding actually that they've had enough, and younger people deciding actually they aren't fit to work, they have poor mental health. And the problem is, as much as nobody wants to sit here and go, no, you need to pull yourself together, you need to get back to work, the numbers aren't really sustainable and they aren't coming down, which suggests that the issues aren't actually being solved. People aren't being cured, they're not being given the sort of help they need, they are just staying off work. That's not actually a good thing. Perhaps they don't want to go back to work, but it can't be a situation where, we have hundreds of thousands of people where you're effectively just told, well, you can take medication and, whenever, if ever you feel better, you can come back. That's not I wouldn't argue that's a very progressive thing. And on the subject of GPs, mental health is not actually necessarily the same as sort of physical health. GPs' jobs encapsulates in all sorts of things. And actually, we do have mental health specialists precisely because it's not the same sort of area that the average GP might have trained on. It wasn't a particularly prevalent thing 10, 20 years ago. And again, the ways of actually addressing it, the ways of dealing with it, the ways of spotting it, what is severe, what isn't, I think is a very different way to noticing physical ailments. So perhaps he has a point about GPs not necessarily diagnosing people with poor mental health, but, generally for people who are physically ill, I think it would be a very bad idea to take the power away from a GP to say this person isn't well enough to work.
Well, Rishi Sunak was actually putting some numbers on this. Listen to some of the costs involved in some of this stuff.
We now spend £69 billion on benefits for people of working age with a disability or health condition. That's more than our entire schools budget, more than our transport budget, more than our policing budget. And spending on personal independence payments alone, it's forecast to increase by more than 50% over the next 4 years.
It's not sustainable, is it, Paul?
Yeah, but why are so many people disincentivised from working, Michelle? Is there an epidemic of bone idleness? Some people undoubtedly are lazy, some people are bone idle. But I think the vast majority of people in this country want rewarding work. But there isn't rewarding work at the moment. What we've got is the gig economy. What we've got is 0 hours contracts. What we've seen is the decimation of our industry, our manufacturing base. We've seen rampant deindustrialisation, the sorts of blue-collar jobs and industries that instilled a sense of pride in people and in communities. Those largely don't exist anymore because we've put all of our eggs in the basket of financial services. And we look upon industry as if it's kind of dirty, menial work. Think of Tony Blair saying that 50% of young people should go to university, not because he thought they should be working in factories with blue collars, because he thought they should be working in the city with white collars. And we look down upon that sort of work. So if you're a working class person in one of those communities, you kind of think, well, and by the way, I'm not defending scroungers, OK? I think the welfare system should be a safety net, not a comfort blanket, as the old saying goes. But it has to be a two-pronged thing. You have to give people an incentive to get up in the morning and to say, we are providing you with good, solid, sustainable jobs in good, solid, sustainable industries. And that has gone from our country, and we've paid a huge price for it.
Do you want to respond to that?
I think there's something in there about work not paying. I think everybody recognises that, and we see that sort of in the housing crisis, the fact that sort of a younger generation of people are struggling to save up enough. I think were, wages to be raised slightly in certain sectors, I do actually think you'd see a lot more people discovering they weren't that unwell to work, and actually they might go back to it if it paid better than benefits did. But I just want to touch upon what you said, which is about working class people. Because I don't think this is necessarily a working class issue. I suspect a lot of these people are upper middle class people. I think that it's not something that just affects one certain cohort of society. I suspect in some ways, I mean, what we often see with mental health conditions, mental illnesses, is that it is mimetic. There are elements to it which are fashionable. In certain circles, you notice it a lot. You'll get a lot of people coming down with the same issues in the same school, and they just happen to be in the same classrooms. It's one of those things that is not particularly well understood, that it is a social contagion as much as it might be a physical one, as much as it might be a mental one. So it's not, again, I say it's not necessarily something that you can just say, oh, it's working class people having a rubbish time. I suspect there is also an element of just lots of people in the same sorts of group, and therefore I do think you'll see a lot of it in the upper and middle classes as well. But the other thing that I'd say is it's really easy to medicate this, because you go to the GP and they just give you your note and your pills and off you go. But that's not a very healthy way long term. If you look at the links between antidepressants and psychosis, for example, it's really not a healthy way of dealing with it. And that's why I go back to what I originally said is, we're not seeing these numbers coming down. And that's something that really does need to be addressed. And even if you do say we need to offer people more money to get back into work, we also need to get people off antidepressants far faster than we currently do.
And it's not just a financial thing in terms of saving people, saving the country money. Work is good because on a social level, it integrates people into society. It helps you build those sort of support networks, those relationships. I've got friendships with colleagues who I've worked with, and they'll be, long-lasting friendships, I'm sure. So, it's not just about the balance sheet at the end of the day. It's about what it does in terms of people's social life, in terms of their agency, in terms of their mental well-being, in terms of their overall health and so on. So we shouldn't, get lost in the fog of, well, this will save us X billion pounds a year. But I go back to the point that for many people, working today is mundane drudgery. That's the truth of it.
So what?
Well, so what? Well, fine, so what? But don't complain then if people think, well, why should I engage in 40, 50 hours a week of
Well, actually, when I say so what, I guess what I mean is, and what? Because in life, who wouldn't want to be, what's that saying? Fines, what is it? Do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. What a wonderful sentiment, and high five if you found your passion and you're living your dream. Excellent. But in reality, most people just have to keep a roof over their head, and you'll do whatever it takes to keep that roof over your head. And guess what? Sometimes that work is not nice.
But I think we've got a responsibility as a society to make work rewarding for people, not just in terms of decent wages, but to create a kind of economy that actually has decent, solid jobs. And we don't do that because we kind of level down. It's a race to the bottom, and we have, transient, precarious employment for people in the gig economy, and we pay them low wages to do it. And we, as I said, we obsess about financial services, which creates a huge disparity. All of the money gets drawn into the southeast. We've seen this over the last 30, 40 years in Britain. All of the money floods in to the city of London and the southeast, and the post-industrial, as they are now, areas of our country have been told, well, you're just going to have to suck it up, because GDP will be a bit better, which it isn't, frankly, but because the country will be better off, we'll have the trickle-down effects, and you'll benefit from the fact that we've got, one of the richest capital cities in the world. And in fact, when you look at those post-industrial areas, when you look at those coastal communities, when you look at places, like small-town, blue-collar Britain, you actually seen that they have been thrown under the bus. You see, societies that are riddled with social decay and violence and family breakdown and drugs and so on, and you see that they haven't benefited financially from that economic approach either. And by doing that, I think we've paid a huge price economically.
I do agree that we've failed a lot of towns and cities. We've closed down the industry, and no one's had the care. And I do think it's a fact of not caring. I think people have not cared to replace that industry or provide good employment. I guess I worry that we're selling, particularly young people, this dream that work is going to be this awesome thing. You're going to find peace in your mind. Sometimes work is really damn boring. It's really mundane. It's really hard work. It's really repetitive. And sometimes you have days where, quite frankly, you don't want to get out of bed and go do it. But you know what? Tough. That's life. Provide for yourself. Provide for your family, if you can.
We're talking about sort of a lot of post-industrial towns. Actually, what was the industry? Coal mining, steel mills, shipyards, that sort of thing. This was not something that was famous for installing, joy in the people that did it. It might have offered a sense of camaraderie. Well, I tell you what, it might have offered a sense of community and camaraderie, but these were things that existed.
There was enormous pride in the mining industry.
These were things that existed.
There was enormous pride in the mining industry. You look at those mining towns and villages, and their...
Let him speak, because I don't want to...
These were things that existed despite the work, because the work was hard and you needed things to offset. And this is the thing. You're sort of like talking about this as if actually everybody enjoys their work or everybody thinks they can. A lot of people work specifically so that what they do outside of work is pleasurable.
There was enormous pride in the mining industry. You cited the example. They had their banners and they had their brass bands, and it was a real sense of community in those industries. When Thatcher closed them down in the mid-1980s, she absolutely destroyed all of that. And some of those pit villages and communities now are still paying the price of that. I think if you speak to miners, they did find it was tough, gruelling work, but they found a sense of reward in it, and it instilled a sense of pride and community in the whole area.
But is the point of modernity not to move away from that situation where actually people don't have to go down mines, they don't have to go to mills, they don't have to
And now
work?
we've got an energy crisis.
Well, we've got an energy crisis because we've decided to go for net zero, which doesn't...
And we decided to...
I mean, honestly, if we want to get... That's an entirely different conversation. Yes, that's true. But actually, what I understood the human condition as being is that progress means that you no longer have to do menial work and you don't have to work the 9 to 5. And actually, if you can find a situation where people can exist there and not have to sort of end up retiring at 55 because their bodies are broken, that would be a positive thing, I would have thought.
And you speak about broken bodies. There'll be many people today, actually, that genuinely are disabled or genuinely cannot do work. And I imagine that when you hear these kind of clampdowns and all the rest of it, I imagine it could actually make people feel very anxious about what is to come. If you are one of those people, get in touch and let me know what goes through your mind when you hear Rishi Sunak talking about launching consultations about things like PIP and all the rest of it.